The escape pod drifted through the cold emptiness of space like a forgotten piece of metal. It had no power. No heat, no signal. It was just a small box floating in the dark, surrounded by millions of stars that did not care if it lived or died. Inside the pod, a young woman named Park Yuna lay unconscious. Blood covered half her face. Her right arm was broken in 2 places. A piece of metal from the explosion had cut deep into her side, and she had lost so much blood that her skin looked like paper. She was 24 years old, and she was dying 3 days ago. She had been a junior engineer on a mining ship called the Brave Star. It was a simple job. They traveled to distant asteroids, collected valuable metals, and brought them back to Earth. The work was boring, but Yuna liked it. She liked the quiet of space. She liked her small room with pictures of her family. She liked the way the stars looked through the windows at night. Then the raiders came. They appeared without warning. 5 ships with weapons that cut through the Brave Star like it was made of paper. Yuna remembered the alarms. She remembered the screaming. She remembered running through smoke and fire while the ship broke apart around her. She remembered finding the escape pod and climbing inside. Just before the corridor collapsed, she remembered pressing a single button on her communicator before everything went black. A button that sent her location back to Earth, along with one word: remember. She floated in the darkness, her breathing slow and weak, her heart barely beating. The escape pod's emergency systems had kept her alive for 3 days, but they were failing. In a few more hours, the air would run out. The cold would finish what the raiders had started. But somewhere in the vast emptiness around her, something was watching. The Elorian medical ship, Gentle Current, moved through the sector on a routine patrol. The Elorians were a peaceful species. They had lived among the stars for over 10,000 years, and in all that time, they had never started a war. They were healers, not fighters. Their ships carried medicine, not weapons. Their purpose was to help, not to harm. Captain Thalos stood on the bridge, his translucent skin glowing softly in the dim light. Like all Elorians, he was tall and thin, with large dark eyes that seemed to hold the sadness of the universe inside them. He had commanded the Gentle Current for 30 years, and in all that time, he had seen many strange things in the depths of space. But he had never seen anything like this. "Captain," his sensor officer said, "there is a small object ahead. It appears to be some kind of vessel, but it is very primitive. No energy signature. No life support active." Thalos walked closer to the viewing screen. The escape pod appeared before him, small and damaged and dark. It looked like something from ancient history, built from simple metal and basic technology. He had never seen its design before. "What species does it belong to?" he asked. "Unknown, Captain. Our records show no match." Talos was quiet for a moment. The laws of the Elorian collective were clear. They were not supposed to interfere with unknown species. They were supposed to observe and report, nothing more. Contact with primitive civilizations could cause harm in ways that were difficult to predict. But then the scanner made a sound, and the sensor officer's voice changed. "Captain, there is a life sign inside. It's very weak. It will not last long." Thalos closed his eyes. He thought about the laws. He thought about the protocols. He thought about the reports he would have to write and the questions he would have to answer. Then he thought about the dying creature inside that primitive metal box, alone in the cold dark with no one coming to save it. "Bring it aboard," he said. The crew moved quickly. They used careful tools to open the escape pod without causing more damage. When they finally looked inside, they found something they had never seen before. It was small, much smaller than an Elorian. It had soft skin in a strange pinkish color and dark hair that grew from the top of its head. It had 2 eyes closed now and a small nose and mouth. Red blood covered its body, so much blood that the Elorians were amazed it was still alive. "What is it?" someone whispered. "A human," Thalos answered softly. He had heard stories about them. A young species from a small planet called Earth. They had only been traveling among the stars for a short time. Most of the galaxy considered them primitive and unimportant, barely worth noticing. But looking at this small creature now, broken and bleeding, but still somehow alive. Talos did not see something unimportant. He saw something fighting to survive. "Take her to the medical bay," he ordered. "Do everything you can. Next few weeks were difficult." Elorian doctors had never treated a human before. They did not understand human biology. They did not know which medicines would help and which would harm. They had to learn everything from the beginning, studying the young woman's body while trying to keep her alive. 3 times her heart stopped. 3 times they brought her back. The crew began to talk about her with something like wonder. How was she still alive? Any Elorian would have died from those injuries. But this small creature from a primitive world kept fighting, kept holding on, kept refusing to let go. On the 18th day, she opened her eyes. Yuna woke to a world of soft blue light and strange sounds. She tried to move but could not. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Fear filled her chest as she looked around at the alien faces staring down at her. Then she saw Thalos. He was standing beside her bed, his large dark eyes watching her with an expression she did not understand. He raised one long hand and made a gesture that seemed meant to calm her. "You are safe," he said, his voice translated by a small device near her ear. "We found you. We healed you. You are safe now." Yuna stared at him for a long moment. She did not know where she was. She did not know who these creatures were. She did not know if she would ever see home again. But she understood one thing. It saved her life. Tears began to fall from her eyes. She opened her mouth, and the first words she spoke to an alien species were simple ones. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Thalos looked at his crew, then back at the crying human. He did not know it then, but that small act of kindness would change the fate of his entire species. He did not know that somewhere far away, a message with a single word was being received by people who would never forget. He only knew that he had done the right thing, and sometimes, in a cold and uncaring universe, that was enough. 3 years had passed since the day the Elorians found Park Yuna floating in the darkness of space. In that time, everything had changed for her, and nothing had changed at all. She still woke up some nights with her heart beating fast. Remembering the fire and the screaming and the feeling of her ship breaking apart around her, she still looked at the stars sometimes and thought about the friends she had lost. She still missed Earth with an ache that never fully went away. But she had also built a new life. A strange and beautiful life among beings who had saved her for no reason at all. Yuna lived now in a small home on Eloria Prime, the homeworld of the Elorian people. The city around her was like nothing she had ever imagined. Buildings made of crystal and light rose into a purple sky. Gardens filled with glowing plants lined every street. Music played softly from somewhere she could never find. Beautiful and sad and peaceful all at once. The Elorians had accepted her. Not just tolerated her, but truly welcomed her into their world. At first, she had been a curiosity. The strange little creature from a primitive planet who laughed too loud and cried too easily and ate food that smelled terrible to Elorian senses. Children would follow her in the streets, watching with their big dark eyes as she walked past. But over time, curiosity had turned into something else. Something warmer. Yuna worked as a cultural liaison now, helping the Elorians understand human ways. She taught them about Earth, about its history, and its people, and its strange customs. She explained why humans shook hands when they met and why they celebrated birthdays and why they told jokes even when things were hard. In return, Elorians taught her their ways. They showed her how to meditate in the gardens of silence. They taught her their language, so different from any human tongue. They shared their food with her, even though most of it tasted like wet paper to her human mouth, and they gave her something she had not expected to find so far from home, a family. Velis was young by Elorian standards, barely 40 years old. In human terms, that made him like a teenager. He was curious and energetic and full of questions about everything. From the first day they met, he had attached himself to Yuna like a younger brother, following his older sister everywhere. "Hey, Yuna!" Yuna, he would call, running toward her on his long, thin legs. "Tell me again about the ocean. Tell me about the waves." And Yuna would smile and sit down with him and describe the beaches of Earth, the sound of water crashing against rocks, the smell of salt in the air, the feeling of sand between her toes. Velis would listen with wonder in his eyes, as if she was describing magic. Sometimes she would teach the Elorian children games from Earth, simple games like tag and hide and seek. The children were confused at first. Why would anyone run away and then want to be caught? What was the purpose? Where was the lesson? But then they tried it, and something wonderful happened. They laughed. Elorians rarely laughed, but the children did as they chased each other through the crystal streets. Their voices high and bright and full of joy. Yuna watched them play, and her heart felt both happy and sad at the same time. Happy because she had brought something good to this place. Sad because she wondered if she would ever go home again. Every week, she sent messages back to Earth. She had built a small communication device herself, using parts the Elorians gave her and knowledge she still remembered from her engineering days. The messages were simple. She described her life among the Elorians. She told stories about the people she had met. She shared everything she learned about this gentle species, who had saved her life without asking for anything in return. She did not know who received her messages. She did not know if anyone on Earth even cared. But she sent them anyway, because it made her feel connected to the home she had lost. What Yuna did not know was that her messages were not just being received. They were being studied far away on Earth, in a building with no windows and many secrets. A man named Admiral Kong Do-yan read every word she wrote. He was old now, with gray hair and a face lined by years of difficult decisions. He had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 40 years, and he had seen things that would give most people nightmares. But when he read Yuna's messages, something strange happened to his hard face. It softened. "Just a little, sir," his assistant asked one day. "Why do we keep such detailed records of her reports? The Elorians are not a military threat. They are not even a political concern." Admiral Kang was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the latest message on his screen. Yuna had written about teaching the children to play tag. She had described the way they laughed. She had mentioned an old Elorian named Thalos, who still visited her sometimes, just to make sure she was happy. "They saved one of ours," the Admiral finally said. "They did not have to. They gained nothing from it. They simply saw a human dying alone in the dark, and they chose to help." He turned to look at his assistant with eyes that held decades of hard truth. "We will remember every name, every act of kindness, every detail. Because if the day ever comes when they need us, we will be there. That is what humans do. We remember, and we pay our debts." The assistant nodded slowly, not fully understanding but knowing better than to argue. On Eloria Prime, Chuna stood on her small balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Her mother and father were there, probably thinking she was dead. Her old friends were there, living their lives without her. Everything she had known was there, possibly far away. She thought about her crewmates from the Brave Star. Jin, Mira, Old Captain, Cho with his bad jokes and kind heart. They were all gone now, lost in the cold darkness between stars. She was the only one who had survived. Why? Why had she lived when they had died? She did not know the answer. Maybe there was no answer. Maybe survival was just luck, random and meaningless. But standing there, in the soft light of an alien world, surrounded by beings who had become her second family, Yuna made a quiet promise to herself. She would honor her lost friends by living well. She would honor the Elorians by being worthy of their kindness. She would make her survival mean something. She wiped her eyes and went back inside. Tomorrow she had promised to teach Velis about snow. He could not imagine water falling from the sky, cold and white and soft. She would try to describe it in a way that made sense to him, and far away on Earth. Admiral Kong Do-yen closed his files for the night and looked out his own window at the stars. He did not know when the debt would be called. He did not know if it ever would be, but he knew that when the time came, humanity would answer. They always did. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy had not yet learned. They looked small. They looked weak. They looked primitive and unimportant, but they never forgot a kindness. And they never abandoned their own. The stars turned slowly in the endless night, keeping their secrets. And somewhere in the vast distance between worlds, a bond was growing stronger. A bond that no one had noticed yet. A bond that would one day shake the very foundations of the galaxy. But that day was still far away. For now, there was only peace. For now. There was only gratitude. For now. There was only a young woman teaching alien children to play games from a world they would never see. And an old admiral reading her letters in the dark. And a debt that grew larger with every passing day. The universe moved on. Cold and vast and uncaring. But humanity was watching, and humanity remembered. The Krathion Empire had conquered 47 worlds. They were brutal and efficient, and completely without mercy. Their warships darkened the skies of peaceful planets. Their soldiers marched through cities that had never known war. Their name was spoken in whispers across the galaxy, because to speak it loudly was to invite their attention. And now their attention had turned to Eloria Una. Heard the news on a quiet morning while she was eating breakfast. The announcement came through every communication device on the planet at the same time. A cold voice speaking words that made her blood freeze in her veins. The hegemony of Krath has claimed the Elorian sector. All Elorian assets, technology, and citizens are now property of the hegemony. You have 30 standard days to surrender. Resistance will result in complete extermination. The message ended. Silence filled Yuna's small home. She ran outside and found the streets full of Elorians standing still. Their large, dark eyes looking up at the sky as if waiting for something terrible to fall. No one was screaming. No one was running. They simply stood there, accepting what was coming with the same quiet grace they brought to everything. Una found Velis near the central garden. He was standing alone, his thin body trembling slightly. Velis. She grabbed his arm. What is happening? What are you going to do? The young Elorian looked at her with eyes full of sadness, but no fear. We will do nothing, he said softly. We have no weapons. We have no soldiers. We have never had war. We will ask the Galactic Council for help, and if they do not help, we will accept our fate. Accept your fate? Una could not believe what she was hearing. They will kill you. They will destroy everything. Velis placed his long hand on her shoulder. The gesture was meant to comfort her, and that made it worse somehow. We have lived for 10,000 years without violence, he said. We will not change who we are, even to survive. That would be a different kind of death, Una wanted to argue. She wanted to scream and shake him and make him understand. But she saw the same quiet acceptance on every Elorian face around her. This was who they were. They would not fight. They could not fight. The very idea was against everything they believed. Over the next few days, Una watched as the Elorians prepared for the end. They did not build weapons or dig shelters. Instead, they gathered their families together. They shared meals and told stories and held each other close. They visited the Gardens of Silence and meditated on the long history of their people. The Galactic Council sent a message. They expressed deep concern about the situation. They called for peaceful dialogue between the Krathians and Elorians. They promised to monitor the situation closely. They did nothing. No one was willing to challenge the Krathian Empire over a peaceful species with nothing to offer. The Elorians had no resources worth fighting for, no strategic value, no powerful allies. They were simply not important enough to save. Una understood then something she had never fully understood before. The galaxy was not kind. The galaxy did not care about right or wrong, about good species or bad ones. The galaxy only cared about power, and the Elorians had none. 2 weeks passed. Krathion warships began to appear at the edge of the system. 200 of them, massive and dark and bristling with weapons. They moved slowly, taking their time, knowing that no one was coming to stop them. Captain Thalos came to visit Una on the 20th day. He was older now, moving slowly. His once bright skin faded with age. But his eyes were still kind, still gentle, still full of the same compassion that had made him save a dying human so many years ago. You should leave, he told her. We can give you a small ship. You can go back to Earth. There is no reason for you to die with us. Una shook her head. I am not leaving you, child. Thalos sat down heavily, like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. We saved your life because it was the right thing to do. We did not do it so that you would throw that life away, please. Go home. Yuna felt tears burning in her eyes. She thought about Earth. She thought about her parents, who she had not seen in so long. She thought about how easy it would be to run, to escape, to save herself. Then she thought about Velis, who called her his sister. She thought about the children who had learned to laugh while playing tag. She thought about all the kindness she had received on this world that was not her own. I will not leave, she said again. But I will not just wait to die either. That night, Yuna sat alone in her room with her communication device. Her hands were shaking as she typed. She did not know if anyone would hear. She did not know if anyone would care. But she had to try. She entered the coordinates of Eloria Prime. She entered the size of the Krathian fleet. She entered everything she knew about the situation. Then she added 3 words at the end. Just 3 small words that carried the weight of everything she felt. They saved me. She sent the message into the darkness of space and waited on Earth. It was the middle of the night when the signal arrived. A young communications officer named Li Ji-woo was working the late shift at the Defense Command Center. She was tired and bored and thinking about going home to sleep. Then her screen lit up with an incoming transmission. She almost ignored it. Almost, but something made her look closer. The sender ID was old, from a system that had not been used in years. The encryption was basic, almost primitive, and the message itself was so short that it should not have triggered any alarms at all. Ji-woo read the 3 words at the end. Her blood went cold. They saved me. She knew that phrase. Everyone in the Defense Command knew it. Park Yuna, the engineer who had survived the raider attack, who had been rescued by an unknown alien species, who had been sending reports from a distant world for years. Ji-woo's hands moved fast. She flagged the message as Priority Alpha. She sent it directly to the highest levels of command. She did everything by the book exactly as she had been trained. Then she sat back and waited, her heart pounding in her chest. 3 hours later, Admiral Kang Do-yeon stood in a room full of the most powerful people on Earth. They had all read the message. They all understood what it meant. The Elorians are facing extinction, the Admiral said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. 200 Krathian warships. No chance of survival, no help coming from the Galactic Council. He paused and looked around the room. They saved one of ours. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. And now they are going to die. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone spoke. What are you proposing, Admiral? Kang Do-yeon stood straight, his old body suddenly looking younger, stronger. Full mobilization, he said. Every ship we have. Every weapon we can carry. We go to Eloria and we tell the Krathians to leave or face the consequences. The Krathians have 200 warships, someone protested. We have never fought a real battle against an alien fleet. This is madness, perhaps the Admiral agreed. But they saved her anyway. They saved her when they did not have to, when they gained nothing from it, when she was just a broken human drifting in the dark. He looked around at the faces staring at him. We are human. We remember our debts, and we pay them. The vote was unanimous, and far away, in a small room on a doomed world, Yuna looked up at the stars and prayed that someone had heard her. She did not know it yet, but her prayer had been answered. Humanity was coming. The order went out at midnight Earth time. Every military base on every continent received it at the same moment. Every ship in every orbit, every station on every moon, every outpost in every corner of human space heard the same words. Full mobilization. All ships. All personnel. Destination, Eloria Prime. Within hours, the skies above Earth began to fill with light. Ships rose from hidden bases, from underwater docks, from mountain facilities that most people did not even know existed. They gathered in orbit like fireflies coming together in the darkness. Admiral Kang Do-yeon stood on the bridge of the flagship, Seoul's Light, and watched his fleet assemble. It was the largest gathering of human warships in history. 212 vessels of every size and type. Battleships and cruisers and destroyers and carriers. Old ships and new ships and ships that had been pulled out of retirement for this one mission. It was not enough. He knew that. Against the Krathian Empire, against their centuries of warfare and their advanced technology. It was probably not enough, but it was everything humanity had, and that would have to be enough. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "We are receiving messages from multiple galactic sources. They are asking about our movements." "Ignore them," Kong said. "Sir, the Tyrellian Council is demanding an explanation. The Vox Trade Federation is threatening economic sanctions." The eye said, "Ignore them." The Admiral's voice was quiet but hard. "We do not answer to them. We answer only to ourselves." The communications officer fell silent. Across the fleet, thousands of men and women prepared for war. They checked their weapons and ran their simulations and wrote messages to loved ones that might never be sent. They were scared. Of course they were scared. They were going to fight an enemy that had never been defeated, in a place they had never been, for a species they had never met. But they were also determined. The story of Park Yuna had spread through the ranks like wildfire. Everyone knew why they were going. Everyone understood the debt that was being paid. Li Ju, the young officer who had received Yuna's message, had requested transfer to the Soul's Light. She wanted to be there. She needed to be there. When the battle came, she wanted to look at the stars and know that she had done something that mattered. She found a quiet moment to send a message of her own. It was addressed to Yuna, though she did not know if it would arrive in time. "We received your signal. We are coming. Hold on. Please hold on." The fleet began to move. They traveled through space faster than human ships had ever traveled before. Engineers pushed engines past their limits. Navigators plotted courses through dangerous regions that normally would have been avoided. Every hour saved was an hour the Elorians might survive, as they crossed through neutral territory. Other species noticed them. Sensor stations detected the strange fleet of primitive human ships moving with unusual speed and purpose. Messages flew between governments, between intelligence agencies, between military commands. What were the humans doing? Where were they going? Why? The Galactic Council sent urgent requests for information. Humanity did not respond. The Vox Trade Federation demanded that the humans explain their military movements. Humanity did not respond. The great powers of the galaxy watched the small human fleet pass through their territories. And they felt something they had never felt before when looking at humanity. They felt unease. On the 7th day of travel, a Krathian intelligence officer delivered a report to Warlord Draxus. The Warlord was a massive creature, covered in thick armor plates and ancient battle scars. He had conquered 12 worlds himself. He feared nothing in the galaxy. "My lord," the officer said, "we have detected a fleet of human ships approaching the Elorian sector." Draxus made a sound that might have been laughter. "Humans? The primitives who still use chemical rockets?" "Yes, my lord. Approximately 200 ships." 200. Draxus laughed again, louder this time. "Send them a warning. Tell them to turn back, or be destroyed. Then forget about them. They are nothing." The warning was sent. The humans received it. They did not turn back. They did not respond. They simply kept coming. On Eloria Prime, the deadline was approaching. 3 days remained before the Krathians would attack. The Elorian people had made their peace with death. They spent their final hours in the Gardens of Silence. Saying goodbye to a world they had loved for 10,000 years, Yuna refused to accept it. She worked constantly, trying to find some way to help. She studied Krathian battle tactics. She looked for weaknesses in their ships. She did everything she could think of. Even though she knew it was hopeless, Vess found her late one night, sitting alone in the dark, staring at screens full of information she could not use. "You should rest," he said softly. "I cannot rest." Her voice was rough with exhaustion. "I cannot just sit here and wait for them to kill everyone I love." Velis sat down beside her. For a long moment, he said nothing. "Yuna," he finally asked, "what do humans do when they are afraid?" She thought about the question. She thought about Earth, about her people, about all the history she had learned as a child. "We get angry," she said. "We fight. Even when we cannot win, we fight. It is who we are. Alice nodded slowly. I think I understand now why you survived. Why you kept living when you should have died. You do not know how to give up. Una felt tears in her eyes. A lot of good it does. I cannot fight a fleet by myself. No, Velis agreed. But you sent your message. You called for help? No one is coming, Velis. The galaxy does not care about us. Velis was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand in his long fingers. You are wrong, he said. You are here. One human came to us, and she changed everything. Maybe you are not the only one. Una wanted to believe him. She wanted to hope. But she had seen too much of the galaxy now. She knew how cold it was, how uncaring. She did not know that at that very moment. 212 human warships were crossing into Krathian-controlled space. She did not know that. Admiral Kung Do-yan was standing on his bridge, watching the stars, preparing his people for the battle of their lives. She did not know that Li Ji-woo was sitting at her station, her hand steady. Her heart full of the same fire that had driven humans to cross oceans and climb mountains and reach for the stars. She did not know that. Humanity was coming, but she would soon, because in 2 days, the sky above Aloria Prime would fill with ships, bearing the flag of Earth, and the galaxy would learn a lesson it would never forget. Some debts cannot be measured. Some kindnesses cannot be repaid. But humanity would try anyway. That was who they were. That was who they had always been, and the Krathians, who had conquered 47 worlds, who had never known defeat, who laughed at the very idea of human resistance they were about to discover what happened when you threatened the friends of a species that never forgot. The silence before thunder was almost over. The storm was coming. The morning of the final day arrived on Aloria Prime with a blood-red sunrise. The Krathian fleet hung in orbit like a dark cloud, 200 warships waiting to begin their destruction. Warlord Draxus broadcast his final message across the planet, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. Your time has ended, Alorians. Surrender now, and some of you may survive as slaves. Resist, and every living thing on your world will burn.
Ow.
No one answered him. The Alorians had nothing to say. They gathered their families and waited for death with the same quiet dignity they had shown throughout their long history. Una stood on the roof of her building, looking up at the enemy ships. Velis was beside her, along with old Captain Thalos and a small group of friends who had become her family over the years. They had chosen to spend their last hours together. I am sorry, Una whispered. I tried to call for help. I thought someone might come. Thalos placed his hand on her shoulder. You did what you could. That is all anyone can do. It was not enough. Perhaps not. But you cared enough to try. That means something. Above them, the Krathian fleet began to move into attack formation. Weapon systems powered up. In moments, the bombardment would begin. Everything Una had learned to love would be destroyed. Then the sensors went insane. All across the Krathian fleet, alarms began to scream. Officers shouted in confusion. Warlord Draxus demanded to know what was happening, and then they saw it. Space itself seemed to tear open as 212 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They appeared in perfect formation between the Krathian fleet and Aloria Prime, their hulls catching the red light of the sun, their weapons already charged and ready. Human ships. Ships that should not have been there. Ships that had crossed half the galaxy in record time for a species that Krathians had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. On Aloria Prime, Una stared at the sky with her mouth open. She could not believe what she was seeing. She could not understand how it was possible. What is that? Velis asked, his voice shaking. Una started to cry. That is my people, she said. That is Earth. Warlord Draxus recovered from his shock and opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His voice was hard with anger. Human vessels, you have entered Krathian space without permission. This is an act of war. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The response came from Admiral Kong Do-yan. His voice was calm and steady. It was broadcast on every frequency and every language so that everyone in the system could hear. Warlord Draxus. 15 years ago, a young woman from Earth drifted alone in the dark. She was dying. She had nothing to offer, and the Elorians saved her. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply chose to help because it was the right thing to do. The Admiral paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of all humanity. We are here to pay that debt. You have one chance to withdraw your fleet and leave this system forever. There will not be a second warning. Draxus laughed. The sound was ugly and full of contempt. You threaten me? With 200 primitive ships, against the fleet that has conquered 47 worlds. You are fools. You are insects, and you will die like insects. He cut the transmission and gave the order to attack. The battle that followed would become known in Galactic history as the 15-Hour War. Military scholars would study it for centuries, trying to understand how a species so young and so technologically inferior had defeated the most feared empire in the known galaxy. But those who were there knew the truth. It was not about technology. It was not about numbers. It was about something the Krathians had never understood and never would. It was about love. Human. Ships fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their weapons overheated, they rammed their damaged vessels into enemy ships. When pilots were forced to abandon their craft, they climbed into escape pods and fired hand weapons at passing enemies. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They did not stop. The Krathians fought with the cold efficiency of a machine. They followed protocols and maintained formations and executed maneuvers from there. Textbooks. But humans did not follow textbooks. They improvised. They adapted. They did things that made no tactical sense until suddenly they made perfect sense. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation to protect their friends, and in doing so, they became something more than soldiers. They became a force of nature. By hour 6, the Krathian fleet had lost 40 ships. By hour 10, they had lost 80. By hour 12, Warlord Draxus was screaming at his captains to break through the human lines. But every time they tried, human ships appeared out of nowhere to stop them. Admiral Kang stood on his bridge, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his uniform torn and dirty. His flagship had been hit 17 times. Half his systems were failing, but his voice never wavered. Hold the line, he ordered. No one gets through. Not one ship. Li Jiwu worked at her station with tears running down her face. Around her, crew members were dying. The ship was falling apart, but she kept working, kept fighting, kept believing. By hour 15, Warlord Draxus made a decision he had never made before in his entire career. He surrendered. The Krathian fleet, or what remained of it, powered down their weapons and raised the signals of defeat. Draxus himself appeared on screen, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. We yield, he said. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. We yield to the human fleet. Admiral Kang nodded slowly. You will leave this system immediately. You will never return. And you will spread the word to every corner of the galaxy about what happened here today. And what is that? Draxus spat. The Admiral smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was steel behind it. That humanity pays its debts. And that anyone who threatens our friends will answer to us. On Eloria Prime, the Elorians watched in stunned silence as the Krathian fleet retreated. They could not understand what had happened. They could not comprehend why the strange, primitive species from a distant world had come to save them. Why UNA could not stop crying. Hours later, the first human shuttle landed on Eloria Prime. Una stood at the landing platform, surrounded by Elorians who watched with wonder in their eyes. The shuttle doors opened, and Admiral Kong Doyon stepped out. He was old and tired and wounded. He had not slept in 3 days. He had lost good people, good friends, good soldiers, who had died to keep a promise. But when he saw Una, he straightened his back and snapped a crisp salute. Engineer Park Una. he said. Humanity has come to collect you. Una ran to him. She threw her arms around him and sobbed against his chest like a child. The Admiral held her gently, like a father holding a daughter he had never met, but had always loved. You came, she whispered. You actually came. Of course we did, he said. You are one of us. And they saved you. Behind them, Captain Thalos approached slowly. He was trembling, his eyes wide with an emotion his species rarely showed. We did not know, he said softly. When we saved her, we did not know what your people were. Admiral Kong turned to face him. The two old men looked at each other across the vast distance of different species, different cultures, different ways of seeing the universe. Neither did we, the Admiral said. But she reminded us. He reached out and took the Elorian's hand in his own. You showed us kindness when you had no reason to. You saved one of our children when it cost you nothing to let her die. And now, you are our friends forever. Until the stars go dark and the universe ends, you will never stand alone again. Thalos bowed his head. When he looked up, there were tears in his ancient eyes. Thank you, he said. Thank you. The galaxy changed after that day. The Krathian Empire collapsed within a decade, torn apart by rebellions and internal conflict. The Galactic Council recognized humanity as a major power, and the Elorians, who had been dismissed and forgotten, became the closest allies Earth had ever known. But the true legacy was simpler than politics or treaties. Across the galaxy, species began to whisper a warning to each other. A warning that spread from world to world, from system to system, until everyone had heard it. Be kind to humans. Be kind to their friends. Because they remember everything. And they will cross the universe to pay back a kindness. Una eventually returned to Earth. She saw her parents again, held them tight, and cried with them for hours. But every year, she went back to Eloria, Prime. She brought gifts and told stories and played games with children who called her auntie. Star, she never stopped saying thank you, and humanity never stopped watching over the beings who had shown mercy to a dying girl in the dark. That was who they were. That was who they would always be, in the universe cold and vast and ancient. I'd finally learned to pay attention, because humans never forgot, and heaven help anyone who forgot that.